Welcome to St. John. Nothing Happened Here, with your hosts Greg Marquis and Mark Allen Green, a show all about a little city on the east coast of Canada where nothing ever happened. Except for this.
Let's get back into the time machine. Today's journey brings us to July the 11th, 1788. We're in the lower cove of the St. John Peninsula, which is the poorer area of town. But there is at least one warehouse in this area that belongs to one of the richest men in New Brunswick, though obtaining such a title doesn't take much in a place where even the rich are poor. The warehouse that we see directly ahead belongs to the legendary Benedict Arnold. It is night. Only the odd soul wanders the street, but someone or something is inside Arnold's warehouse. Through a window, we see one or more figures making their way up a staircase to the top floor. Their movement would have gone unnoticed, but for a candle that one is carrying, presumably to light the way through the darkness. Or perhaps the candle was not intended to light the way at all. The candlelight suddenly disappears, but is replaced by something that glows much brighter. The first lick of flame shoots from within. It is not long before the entire top floor is engulfed. The heat cracks the thin window glass and spews out smoke and fire that soon envelops the massive warehouse. The inferno quickly spreads to a neighboring house and devours it as though it were nothing. The only blessing is that the winds are not blowing in from the harbor. If they were, there wouldn't be a lower cove remaining. The fire engine arrives, which is not much more than a few barrels of water pulled by horses. The men create a bucket brigade to douse the flames. Though the means are crude, the men do an admirable job to stop the fire's deadly spread. But then, we see a man stagger out from where the building once stood. Though his face is blackened, his identity is unmistakable. It is Henry Arnold, the son of Benedict Arnold. He narrowly escaped being burned alive. But where is Benedict Arnold right now? Well, he is an ocean away on a trading voyage to England, but that does not stop what happens next. As soon as Benedict Arnold returns to his St. John home, he receives word about the destruction of his warehouse and his son's close call. A while later, he is greeted by his business partner, Munson Haight, in the most unbecoming way. Haight gets right up into Arnold's face and in a loud voice for all to hear, says these words: "I will convince the world that you are the greatest rascal that there ever was, that you burnt your own store, and I will prove it." Benedict Arnold is a man with a reputation of not allowing his reputation to be challenged. Legend has it that before the American Revolution, Arnold fought a duel in Honduras against a captain who had questioned his honor. It was just sheer luck on the captain's part that he survived the confrontation with Arnold. And here, we have Munson Haight questioning Arnold's honor in the middle of his new home city. Luckily for Haight, Arnold first uses words rather than guns. Arnold says to Haight that the man has blackened his character. Does Haight now back away? No. He doubles down by saying, "It is not in my power to blacken your character, for it is as black as it can be. But one thing I will let the world know is that you burnt down your own store." What happens next would be a first for the new colony of New Brunswick. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. I'm Mark. Over there, that's Greg, and that means St. John, nothing happened here, with the exception of Benedict Arnold. Now, this is the time of the show I like the most. I play the game, What is Greg Drinking Today? You're drinking a coffee?
Yes.
I thought it might be something from the Big Tie Brewing Company.
Right. Yes. Well, Mark, Big Tie Brewing Company, located in St. John. They do have a seasonal brew. It's a Benedict Arnold special bitter.
Ah! Yeah. And what's the tagline again on that?
The tagline is, "It won't betray you."
Okay, that's a lot of fun. Good on Big Tie Brewing, but I think it speaks as well to the legacy of Benedict Arnold in St. John. We're talking close to 2.5 centuries after Benedict Arnold, and the town's still talking about him.
They certainly have a memory of him. There is a plaque at 20 King Street in the uptown area of St. John, which tourists and locals can check out. But, not a lot. Even I didn't know, and I'm an academic historian, I didn't know a lot of the details of Benedict Arnold's time in St. John. So, I found that very intriguing. And of course, he's a fascinating character overall.
Well, we're going to find out more about Benedict Arnold and his time in St. John, but we have to understand who Benedict Arnold is, because I think that really instructs how he conducted himself in St. John and his reputation in St. John, which wasn't exactly shining. We just heard about the burning down of the warehouse, and we'll get into that a bit more. But give me some descriptors of Benedict Arnold. This is a polarizing character in history.
Yeah, well, particularly with American nationalism, he's become probably the most infamous traitor in American history, and because of the power of American culture worldwide, it's kind of become a catchword, for someone committing treason or being a traitor. So, vain, arrogant, and stubborn, betrayed his country, the quintessential traitor. On the other hand, the best officer on either side in terms of his military capabilities.
Polar opposites here.
Yeah, Washington's ablest general. Right.
How about the American Hannibal?
Yes. And I listened to a podcast recently where someone described Arnold as not a very nice person.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's a deep insult.
Yes.
Now, as we know from Arnold, and how the listeners will soon know, is if you had said that to his face, you probably would have a pistol pointed at you. But where do you sit on Benedict Arnold?
Benedict Arnold is sort of a product of American colonial society who sort of tries to fit into that society, doesn't fit, and then tries to fit in British society, doesn't quite fit. So again, I just find him he's really hard to put in a peg or like to put in a box.
I'm starting to have some respect for the man and understand the man. Like, certainly there's things that we're going to put in the negative camp. Let's go back. Your childhood shapes the person you become. And I think we need to go back there to Benedict Arnold's childhood to really understand them. And he was born in 1741. He was Benedict Arnold IV. He came from a long line of Benedict Arnolds. His name is so synonymous with traitor, is that as soon as I said he came from a long line of Benedict Arnolds, I was thinking, I just said he came from a long line of traitors. But right. He was the fourth. His great-grandfather was the governor of Rhode Island. His family came from money and prestige, except this happened to him. So he was the second of 6 children born to Benedict Arnold the third. And 4 of his siblings died. And we're talking the first Benedict, the Benedict Arnold IV, who died at the age of 1. Then another child died at 3 and 6 and 8. And this just ripped his family apart, especially his father, Benedict Arnold III. Took it really hard, and he took to the bottle and basically drank himself out of the family fortune and the respect of the community. So when Benedict Arnold was young, he was from a respected family, and then suddenly losing all that and looking at his father and going, "You did this to me." Your thoughts on that, Greg?
Well, yeah, trying to prove himself. And again, if you look at his career, in a way, not to get into psychoanalysis here, but he does seem to spend the rest of his life trying to protect and preserve his reputation and to prove himself.
I'm with you on the reputation, but it seems like it's not just preserving his reputation, it's earning it back. It's earning his family's reputation, his family's fortune back was a big driver for him. And then add in his mother. His mother didn't take well to this, especially having her husband be the disgrace of a puritanical community. She joined a church.
The First Great Awakening in the early 1730s, 40s, kind of a back to basic religion, evangelical.
Hell and brimstone and you will die and you better live well, and we can't even tell you what living well means. That's going to be up for God to decide if you live well enough. So a lot of that kind of drove him, and he goes, the community's turning their back to me, and plus I'm getting this puritanical religious fervor being thrown in my face, and I'm hating this. I'm hating being condemned, and I'm hating this arbitrary power. And that seemed to be two things he really hated going forward. And it got instilled at an early age. He joined the military with the French Indian Wars at the age of 16. So he went off to war only for 13 days.
Right. Yeah.
So that was the extent of his military experience, which I find remarkable considering what he ended up becoming.
Yeah, you mean the extent, Mark, prior to the American Revolution.
13 days of military experience. He started the American Revolution in a leadership position.
Yeah.
So I find that remarkable. We'll delve into that a bit more. He was supposed to have a certain future, and he was going to go to college like someone of his standing should. But family lost the fortune, and that's how he became an apothecary. And it was a 7-year, I believe, unpaid apprenticeship that he had to do before he was able to hang his own shingle.
Yeah, back then apprentices weren't really paid. They were probably given an allowance and room and board and maybe a small stipend. And then you would become a master and set yourself up in a trade or a business.
Yes, and so he got through the 7 years, hung out his own shingle, and he started doing some trading as well. He became a very successful businessman. And you could kind of tell Greg, he was like, finally, I'm going to get it all back. My father squandered it away. I'm going to get it all back. And then entered the Brits. They had just fought a very expensive war, the 7 Years' War. And they were looking to recoup the cost of the American campaign. And they started instituting these taxes, one being the sugar tax, the other being the stamp tax, which hit American business hard, including Benedict Arnold's business.
Yeah. Yes. Well, of course, anyone involved in trade, they didn't want to have to pay those customs duties and those different taxes. So he became, an early convert, I guess, to resisting the authority of the British Parliament over American businesses and American enterprise. So that's one of the sparks for the American Revolution, right?
Yes. So he joined the Sons of Liberty well before the American Revolution and actually started to form his own militia, getting ready for this. Now, the stamp tax, that was an interesting one. So basically that was you had to put a stamp on every piece of legal paper used. Yeah. And legal paper included playing cards. Like, I don't know the extent of what was considered legal paper. I don't know if, like, your child would go to you and go, hey, here's a picture of you, Daddy. I drew a picture of you and me, Daddy. And then you would go, oh, thank you very much. That's going to look really great in my prison cell, little Sally, because you don't have an official stamp on it.
Yeah.
Do you know how much paper that they had to stamp?
I'm not sure of those details, but it was enough to raise the ire of many, many, many people in the 13 colonies, obviously.
Right? Absolutely, including Benedict Arnold. So he had his own family. So he married Margaret Mansfield, who came from wealth as well, and he was able to leverage that. They had 3 sons, Benedict, Richard, and Henry. Richard and Henry ended up moving to St. John. So that's the St. John connection. Last thing to kind of mention about his early life is he did not like his reputation to be challenged. And there was that incident that may or may not have happened. And you might wreck my good story here, Greg. Being a historian, sometimes you wreck the great stories with historical facts. But the duel in Honduras in 1770, when some captain questioned his integrity, and called him like a uncouth Yankee or something like that. The captain just narrowly escaped with his life. So you don't mess with Benedict Arnold.
It's certainly part of the legend. So, he's very proud and very headstrong.
Right? Now we're going on to the American Revolution, and we're going to keep some scores. Greg, you want to do that? Like, kind of score him on certain things that he did and go, spoke well to his character or spoke poorly to his character. You want to play the game?
Well, we'll try, but sometimes there's nasty people involved in changing history for the good. So it can be tough.
We'll be fair.
Yeah,
we'll be fair.
We'll give it a try. Yeah.
I didn't say it was going to be an easy game, Greg.
No, okay.
Okay, so let's look at Fort Ticonderoga. So we had the initial beginnings of the American Revolution. Benedict Arnold had his militia going on. The Americans were at a deficit from a military perspective. They had nothing. They didn't have the cannons. They didn't have the guns. They didn't have the warships. They didn't have anything. Benedict Arnold goes, hey, you know what? There's a fort. It's called Fort Ticonderoga, and it's a British fort, and they have lots of cannons. Why don't we go up there and steal those? And the Americans think that's a good idea, but they send Benedict Arnold, and they send another colonel up there to capture the fort, and that other colonel was Ethan Allen.
Green Mountain Boys, right?
The Green Mountain Boys. So it's Benedict Arnold's militia and the Green Mountain Boys going to Fort Ticonderoga, and they end up capturing it.
And why do they need those cannons? What's the immediate thing?
To secure Boston?
Boston, yeah. There's a large number of American militia gathering in Boston, but they don't have a lot of artillery, and the British have not evacuated Boston yet.
But then you have two leaders coming in and trying to claim that, this was all me. So Ethan Allen, this was all me. Benedict Arnold goes, you know what? I'm actually had something to do with this. So this is a first confrontation with another military leader on the same side. And then you had John Brown, which ends up figuring into this quite a bit. John Brown was an actual relative of Benedict Arnold and a longtime acquaintance. And he ended up siding with Ethan Allen on this. So they got into it at Fort Ticonderoga. And basically, Ethan Allen took the credit for this. And I can just imagine like Benedict Arnold just stewing over this and going, Ethan Allen, you robbed me of my dreams. I'm going to rob you of yours. As long as I live and breathe, you will never have a high-end furniture store named after you. Yeah. That's the first of my Ethan Allen jokes.
Yeah.
Did that land?
Yes, it did. But, Mark, your humor is underscoring a pretty obvious point that there's politics within the American Army as it's evolving, and with Congress, and just like in other places in the world, different times in history, it's not just the good guys versus the bad guys. You have a lot of squabbles within your own side, right?
You do, and this starts setting the course of the future of Benedict Arnold. He made a powerful enemy with Ethan Allen and with John Brown supporting Ethan Allen. Yep. So you have the guns secured. Then Benedict Arnold looks out at the Lake Champlain that Fort Ticonderoga sat on, and he goes, you know what? If I can control the lake, then I can control the continent, at least from the British coming down from Canada, or what would become Canada. Yeah. So he crafts some ships from basically nothing because the Americans had no naval assets. So he puts together some boats. He steals a boat, I believe, from Fort St. Jean when they attacked it. But he, for a while, controlled Lake Champlain. And then he goes, I got it. And then he goes, Second Continental Congress, can you provide me some support? And they go, I don't know, Benedict. I don't know about that. And they ended up, they wouldn't provide him the support he needed to keep the lake. So, and then bring in Allen, Ethan Allen and Brown came in, and they convinced Congress to have him removed from command. Yeah. That's a big blow. That's a big slap in the face to Benedict Arnold. So he was relieved of command after he did some remarkable things on Lake Champlain. Then He was like going, oh, I'm done with whatever. And then he got a call from Washington. And that brings us to the siege of Quebec City and the trek through the wilderness of Maine.
Yeah, well, I think he kind of lobbied for that too, because he wanted another command. He didn't get it, so then he asked to recruit. He recruited some New Englanders and some Pennsylvania, Virginia riflemen, and they went up overland through Maine.
Can you take us for a walk
Yeah.
through the winter of the Maine wilderness? Because I think that too was an important part of Benedict Arnold.
They start in the fall. They start with 1,100 men, and they're portaging up the Kennebec River and other rivers and Lake Temiscouta and places like that. And the weather sets in, and by the time they get to Quebec, they're low on food. There's a lot of hardship. It's got to be one of the more epic military treks in American history in terms of the time of year.
Because it's something you don't do, Greg. You do not march an 18th century army through the wilderness of Maine in the winter. Yeah. And this
winter's coming.
And that trek really spoke to his character. Other colonels deserted. Yeah. We're gone.
Yeah.
But from all accounts, Benedict Arnold was like there, like keeping morale up, being with his men. And he eventually found food for them. Okay. And then the sights of Quebec City. Tell us what Quebec City looks like coming in from the south side of the St. Lawrence.
Well, when you approach it from the water, it's pretty formidable because it's on a height of land. And, fortifications, the British had inherited fortifications from the French. There's a lower town. There's an upper town. It was a walled city. If you visit Quebec City now, you can see the old walls. And you can actually see plaques around the old walls, which show the scenes of some of the fighting, I think, as far as the Americans penetrated it.
But that St. Lawrence River, Greg, would you even cross it? Like, would you get up to that? Like, I know me, I'd be like, oh, look at the ice flows. No. But Benedict Arnold's going, I'm doing this. And that again spoke to his character. I will not surrender.
Yeah, there are two wings. I mean, it was Montgomery's plan, right? So one group under Montgomery and another under Arnold. Montgomery was killed, and then so the plan was faulted in hindsight because it didn't work. If it had worked, it would be brilliant.
Yes, and that's the key to this. Like, I wouldn't say the tactics were flawed. It was their perceived response as being liberators of Quebec City, and that the French Canadians will go, hey, your British overlords are no longer here. You were fighting them 16 years ago on the Plains of Abraham. Don't you want us to come in? And they actually went in with speaking French and go, Viva Liberté, and you're free. And then they got shot at. But one thing that happened, this is a very instructive point of Benedict Arnold. This is the first time he got shot in the leg.
Yes. Yeah.
He should have been evacuated to a safe place, but he goes, nope, I am staying here.
Yes.
I am going to see this siege through. And he was in bad pain. Like, this could have been a mortal injury. He could have lost his leg. And he was like, leave me with my gun. Leave me with my sword. If the Brits come through those doors, I'm going to take as many of them out as I can. But he stayed for the entire winter for that siege and would not give up until Congress goes, we're not supporting this.
Well, he had good tactical sense and strategic sense. It's true that the political situation wasn't well thought out, but in the military situation, it made perfect sense to strike early against Quebec because the British were obviously going to use Quebec as a supply base to strike from the north, right? So he was dead on. But then when he sensed that, okay, the British are now getting reinforcements here, we're losing men from smallpox. It's true that the American Army was rebuilt by the spring of 1776 in the Northern Theater, as they called it, but the deck was stacked against them. Arnold didn't want to do a strategic retreat, and Congress at first didn't want them to do that. So he could see where things were going.
Okay, well, let's do our points. Remember, we're playing Benedict Arnold. So Ticonderoga, would you say points in favor of Benedict Arnold and his character?
Yes.
Okay, how about raid on Fort Saint-Jean?
Yes.
And siege of Quebec City?
Well, it wasn't his plan, but his tenacity to go overland his willingness to stay in the area.
I agree with all those. So we're giving the points to Arnold for this. So he ended up doing that strategic withdrawal, as you were saying, and did scorch earth essentially on the way back. So burning about everything, burning bridges. So the Brits did not have anything to use as a delay tactic, right? Is because he didn't want the Brits to give chase right away.
And Charleton was later criticized for being too cautious and not following right up. But, at some point, the Americans were going to feel that pressure as the larger British force came down Lake Champlain, right? And it was heading directly at them.
So then his political troubles began between the siege of Quebec City and the Battle of Valcour Island. Yeah. And that's Moses Hazen, which we're going to be talking about him in a future podcast.
It's a very, very chilling aspect of 18th century New Brunswick history when we get to Moses Hazen. Yeah.
Absolutely. So Arnold calls out Moses Hazen for stealing stuff during the strategic withdrawal from Quebec. And Moses Hazen is up on charges. Arnold has to come in as a witness. And then you bring in Ethan Allen and John Brown again. They're able to somehow turn it around, these disciplinary hearings against Moses Hazen, to an attack on Benedict Arnold.
Yes.
So they go, no, it's you who's the problem here. And the hearing council turns against him. And guess what Arnold does? Arnold challenges the members of that hearing panel to a duel. Go, you want a piece of this? You want a piece of this? You're calling me a thief after everything I did? Pistols of dawn. No one took him up on. No one messes with Benedict Arnold. Yeah. I would say it's kind of point against point forward. That's what you were saying. Like, it's hard to sort this out. Yeah. Is this showed his lack of political acumen, how he handled this situation. But I think that's kind of a point four. Is that he didn't have the political acumen. He was a doer. Yeah. And someone who doesn't play politics, I kind of respect them in a way. And then Valcour Island. Take us to Valcour Island. This was one of the most remarkable battles.
The British assembled a fairly large force of several thousand. They might even had some Hessians by this time, the German mercenaries, but they certainly got their reinforcements. They had some First Nations or indigenous allies. They assembled a large fleet of many small vessels carrying troops, and they were heading down Lake Champlain towards Crown Point and Ticonderoga. So Arnold, again, this has proved to be one of the most important battles of the war. In hindsight, he assembled a small fleet of small vessels.
Tell us about assemble.
Well,
this is important because you hit the word perfectly. Assembled.
Let's throw together a small fleet over a few days or a few weeks. I forget.
With guys who didn't know how to build ships.
Yeah. They did have a schooner, though. They did have a schooner, and I think they had 11 boats, and some were called gondolas, which are like, galleys that were rowed, and they put some cannons on them and a bunch of guys, and they were going against a much bigger British fleet. Now, I forget if the British had any major schooners.
The HMS Inflexible.
Okay, there you go.
They actually had to reassemble it on Lake Champlain, and it caused a delay of 28 days, but it was a huge battleship.
So this little ragtag fleet that Arnold put together was later described as the first U.S. Navy. I don't know if that's true, but he didn't wait around. He went up to meet the enemy. Now,
yes.
That sounds like the Hollywood movie version, right? Uh-huh. So there's several hundred enemy vessels coming down. We have 11. So he hid in the area, and I think realistically, he thought he was going to delay. And the important thing, Mark, is why was it important to delay the British?
Because the British were going for the full offensive. They wanted to wrap up the war, and they may have if they had gone down.
Yeah, there were two things going on that summer, and the British succeeded with one of them. One was to capture the island of Manhattan, because they had lost Boston in 1776, capture the island of Manhattan, and then come down through Lake Champlain and link up through upstate New York and sort of have control, have a secure corridor from Quebec right down to Manhattan. And just think, Mark, if that had happened, it's one of those what ifs, the war could have gone on for years, or maybe the British would have won. Who knows? So
he's going up against the Royal Navy, on Lake Champlain. He goes behind on the New York side of Valcour Island into a little bay where the big British ships can't really get into.
Yeah.
So it's more shallow. So it's really only conducive to smaller ships. So he hides there. And everyone's like, oh, well, the British might come down this side of Valcour Island and wipe us out. And he goes, no, I think they're going to go on the other side. They're going to the deeper part of this. And they end up going on the deeper side, the British. Benedict Arnold was actually scared that they were going to miss him because he needed to confront them. So he sends up some boats, fires a few shots of them, and goes, hey, look at us, we're here. And the British go, oh, well, we're coming. But they have to bring in smaller boats, and they start the battle. And it was a brutal battle. And the Americans suffered severe losses of boats and men. And it went on until dark. And then this was the strategic genius of Benedict Arnold, is he goes, we got to get out of here. We're not going to survive another day. We've done what we needed to do. We're slowing them down. We got to make the escape. And he did this daring night escape where he just lined up the ships on the shallow part where he thought the British wouldn't be sitting. And he snuck right by the Royal Navy. And they wake up the next day, the Royal Navy go, okay, time to wipe out the Americans. Where are they? They're gone. And then the chase begins. Remember, the Americans still have Fort Ticonderoga. Benedict Arnold has to get back there with what's remaining of his American Navy. And the British start giving chase with big ships. There's the rear guard of the American ships. And guess who's on that rear guard, putting himself in harm's way?
Arnold.
Benedict Arnold, to slow down the British so that the rest of his troops can make it to the safety of Fort Ticonderoga. And this is the thing. Reading about this, I picture John McClane from Die Hard. This is Benedict Arnold. Like he's just shooting and running around the boats and just firing at the British. And for some reason, he survives this. And which is remarkable in and of itself, slows down the British long enough that he's able to get the boats to the base of Fort Ticonderoga, burn them, and get him and his men to the safety of the fort.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
He's the 18th century action hero.
Yeah. Yeah. And Mark, so this, is interpreted as a tactical victory for the British, but it's a strategic defeat for the British because it delays their offensive into New York colony or New York State for another season or another year. So, and again, how does Congress repay Benedict?
First, let's give him points. Let's give the Benedict Arnold game huge amount of points. Like I'm dumping a bag of points.
Yeah.
For this one.
But there are people who accuse him of losing too many ships to the enemy, the ships that he built.
Okay. You know what?
Vessels.
Greg, I'm feeling Benedict Arnold's bitterness now with that. Like after the story I just told, and then you go, Benedict, you lost too many ships, dude.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what? Do you know what I just lived through and what I did strategically? And no, Benny, no.
Yeah.
So Valcour Island was a huge victory.
Yeah.
And then it came time for promotion. So normally you would get a big promotion for being a hero like he was on that day. Did he get promoted by Congress? Remember, Congress is the one handing out the major general. he did not get it, but they chose 5 others. So Congress promoted 5 other people above Benedict Arnold.
Right.
And that's when you got a good taste of politics coming from Congress on going, Benedict, you're from Connecticut and we have a bunch of major generals from Connecticut. So, we have to be fair with the other colonies.
Yeah. So Mark, then Benedict Arnold just gets disgusted and folds up his tent and goes home.
Yeah, you would think that. And he did. And then Washington goes, we need you.
Yeah.
We need a guy like Benedict Arnold in the front line. So he got called back. Benedict Arnold was in charge of basically the Connecticut front. And then there was an attack on Connecticut by the British, and that was the Ridgefield. So he was like, nah, it's time to go. Remember the 18th century action hero? I'm getting the call. We're getting attacked. I'm going to meet them. So he went out and held the line at Ridgefield for a while to hold the British back. He got a horse shot out from underneath him.
Yes.
So that's like the first horse. And then in the retreat, and he retreated, he had to, but he kept on menacing the British all the way along. Like he kept on striking and then retreating, striking and retreating. He had a second horse shot out from underneath him. Right. And after that, he was finally promoted to Major General. So he goes, finally, justice served. Except Congress goes, yeah, you're Major General, but we're not restoring your seniority. So all those 5 who were promoted before you, including Horatio Gates, you're not senior to them. He doesn't like that, does he?
So then, as we've talked about, the British are coming back. Summer is coming, summer of 1777.
Yes. And then we have John Burgoyne.
Yes.
From the Brits. So they're going, okay, we're going to come down, and they retake Fort Ticonderoga. Yeah. And then they're going, we're seeing it as we're going to take the Hudson, we're going to divide the 13 colonies and their resources and their supply lines, and we're going to wrap this thing up. So this is it's called the Saratoga Campaign, right?
Yeah, it's a series of battles and maneuvers, and it's a classic example of the British maybe we'll just go another day, and every day gets worse.
Yes.
And they don't have their indigenous allies. They're not well supplied. And the American militia and American forces are putting a much tougher fight.
Here's 2 major generals coming to the battle. You have Major General Benedict Arnold and Major General Horatio Gates.
Yes.
And Horatio Gates has seniority. Then bring in back in Daniel Morgan. Now, Daniel Morgan, I forget if you mentioned, he got taken prisoner in Quebec City. Yeah. He was released on a prisoner exchange, and now he's back in the fight. So Daniel Morgan, Benedict Arnold are often noted as being the most capable of military leaders during the American Revolution. Yeah. So they are doers. Horatio Gates, I wouldn't call him a doer.
But he's connected, and often if the army wins the battle, the general gets the credit, right? So
the general gets the credit. Now, so this is what happened. We had the first battle of Saratoga. Yeah. So it's not going well until Benedict Arnold starts entering into the field and taking command and right up into the front lines of this.
Yeah.
So he saves the day, but what does Gates do? Gates takes him out of the battle and says, you go back to your tent. I'm sidelining you because I think you're getting in the way of my strategy. Yeah. So Benedict Arnold had to spend the rest of that first battle out of commission, and hearing the cannon fire, hearing the men scream and going, I want to go back. And it's just like, I'm under orders not to. So the first battle of Saratoga went in favor of the British, but it was not a good win.
No, attrition.
So they kept the battlefield, but then it sat for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And the British started fortifying. Then we had the second battle of Saratoga.
Yeah.
And that one was, again, it was not going well because Benedict Arnold wasn't in the mix, and it was being led by Horatio Gates. And then Benedict Arnold ended up hearing, things are going bad. And he goes, forget orders, I'm going in. So as everything was kind of falling apart, here comes riding in Benedict Arnold, and he ends up getting the troops back and making that push in, and actually was one of the first people to breach the British lines. So he goes, gotcha. And then one young Hessian soldier takes his gun, points it at Benedict Arnold, and shoots him. And where does he shoot him?
Is it in the leg or the foot?
The same leg that got shot in Quebec.
Yes. Yeah.
So Benedict Arnold goes down. Now tell me this, Greg. Is this folklore or is this real history? Because supposedly the Americans were about to shoot the Hessian that shot Benedict Arnold, and then Benedict Arnold spared his life.
I don't know that story. It's plausible.
Such a great story that it almost seems like it might not have been true.
Yeah.
But, if that's true, that's another point in favor of Benedict Arnold. But Benedict Arnold is removed from the field of battle, not as a hero. How was he removed?
Disobeying orders.
Yeah. Remember, Gates said, you do not engage Benedict Arnold. You stay in your tent.
Yeah.
I should mention this, too, about the first Battle of Saratoga. There was a dispatch sent to Congress saying all the good things that happened, and guess whose names were not on that list as contributing anything?
Arnold and Morgan.
Yeah. Arnold and Morgan, the ones who really did. But whose name was all over it?
Gates.
I'm Horatio Gates. I am the best. Look at me. It was all me.
Didn't his enemies call him Granny Gates?
Yeah, there were a lot of names for him.
Yeah.
But okay, so we have the Battle of Saratoga. So he is taken off the field. His leg is in bad shape. It's going to have to be amputated. And that's when he goes to the doctor. No one amputates my leg. I will shoot you dead if you even try.
Yeah.
So the doctors have to try to actually save his leg. And that causes a deformity. I believe like it ended up shortening his leg, how they had to save it. So he walked with a limp after Quebec. Yeah. He was seriously disabled after the Battle of Saratoga.
And Mark, not to say that Arnold was the one guy, obviously, but, he was very important in those last few battles in the Saratoga campaign. What is the significance of Saratoga to the future of the war?
It is huge because that convinces some big body, let's call it a body now, not give any spoilers, who were sitting on the sideline going, I don't know if we should get involved in this, to go, we're getting involved, and that's the French.
Yeah, I think they might have been already funneling money.
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
But they weren't directly involved. But they go, after this, you've proven, Americans, you've got a standing British army to surrender.
Yeah, field army. And of course, in time, that'll bring in some other European allies, but it's a major ally. It's the first real ally for the Continental Army and the Congress.
So it starts off with American Revolution. Now it's turning into a world war, thanks to the victory of Saratoga, which I say a lot of credit needs to go to Benedict Arnold.
That's right.
Okay, so then we move on. So he's trying to recover, save his leg. He is bitter. He's going, what have I given so much for? Because he's like not getting recognized whatsoever for any of this. You could imagine what it would have been like for him. Just going, Congress is messing around with me. They didn't give me the promotion. And this is the other thing that started to play in is the money. There was money owed by Congress because Benedict Arnold had troops and they had to get paid. And often Congress wasn't paying them. And he would take his own money to pay his troops. Mm-hmm. So he would go to Congress and go, hey, Benedict Arnold here. You probably know me from such great battles as the Battle of Valcour or Battle of Saratoga. You owe me some money. And then Congress turns around and goes, oh, yeah, sorry about that. That's an appropriation bill. And if an appropriation bill doesn't go through, we have this thing that happens. And Benedict Arnold goes, well, what happens if appropriation bill doesn't go through? And they go, well, Benedict Arnold, have you ever heard of U.S. government shutdown?
Yeah.
Because you will. And so will the entire American people. And that was the first U.S. shutdown. No, that's not true. That's a joke.
Well, not only that, not only did they refuse to pay what he thought were legitimate expenses, they wanted him to pay Congress money for misappropriations.
And then Washington steps in. Washington is his ally.
Yeah.
And Washington goes, you deserve something, and we're going to give you the military governorship of Philadelphia.
Yes.
So bring us to that.
Yeah, so he's given the military governorship. At this time, the Continental Army was still controlling Philadelphia, one of the major cities in the 13 colonies. There were a lot of Tories there, but there was also a radical patriot faction in Pennsylvania, right, who became enemies of Arnold because they thought he was too conservative, too close to the Tories and the wealthy people when he got there. And he was now a widower. His wife had passed away in Connecticut, I believe. He was in his 40s. And he met a young socialite called Peggy Shippen, who was the daughter, only 18 years old, of a prominent Tory family.
Yeah, so he's set up as a military governor, and you can tell that he's like, it's time for me to have what I deserve. I gave so much for this country. So he sets himself up in a really nice home, one of the nicest homes in Philadelphia, and he starts living the life. As you said, he meets Peggy, marries her. He's getting back into business and is back into his trading ways because he was a brilliant military leader, brilliant businessman. And then you get his enemies coming in and they end up setting him up essentially for another court martial. And what they said was war profiteering. Yeah. And it was petty. What the accusation is that he used wagons, government wagons, to ship some of his stuff from the port into town. Right. And they go, well, you can't do that. That's government property. And he actually goes, oh, I'm so sorry. I'll pay for that. And they go, no, you're not going to pay for it. You're going to get court-martialed. Mm-hmm. So that probably was getting to be the last straw, if it wasn't the last straw before this. And then Washington actually goes, geez, you know what? He was getting so much pressure to do something. He reprimanded Benedict Arnold. So Benedict Arnold's friend, George Washington, reprimands him, and then tell us what happens.
Yeah, the British contacted him, Beverly Robinson, British officer, or loyalist militia officer, to test the waters. And then he began corresponding through a number of go-betweens, eventually with Major John Andre. All these characters are portrayed in AMC TV's series Turn, which is about Washington's spies. And in that series, we forgot to mention this, Arnold is kind of portrayed in a nuanced way, but Peggy is portrayed in a bit of a negative way, helping to cause her husband's downfall, right? So he's in debt. He feels neglected, abused, insulted. He's partially crippled, right? He's kind of fed up, and also, Mark, he doesn't totally trust France. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the many factors that I think that shapes his thinking. Right. And so even before the infamous plan is formulated, he is sending what we would call military intelligence to the British through the secret correspondence about troop movements and troop sizes and things like that.
Yes. And he's signing everything under a pseudonym, George Monk.
Okay.
Why is that important, Greg?
Is that from the English Civil War in the 17th century?
A person who switched sides away from the revolution and ended up being seen as a hero to this very day.
Okay.
So I think he saw himself as doing the right thing by the American people, going, this is not working out. And I'm seeing stuff come from Congress that seems to be very similar to the stuff that we were fighting against. Like, he was a very principled person. Yeah. In his own mind, whether it's correct or not, I'll leave that up to other people to decide. But, in his mind, he goes like, this is just tyranny to tyranny. Yeah. In his mind. So he goes, okay, he hatches the deal. And what is the deal? It's West Point, to surrender West Point. Why would that be important?
Well, now we associate West Point with the military training, but back then it was a strategic fortress for the Continental Army on the Hudson. It was keeping the British out of that area. The British were strong in New York City to the south, in Manhattan, under General Clinton. And if the British could have full access to the river, they might be able to hook up with those forces from Quebec, and dangled the carrot of, hey, maybe we can time the handover to the British when George Washington and his aide, Alexander Hamilton, are going to be visiting, right? And was it 10,000 pounds, Mark? That was his price he demanded?
I had 20,000.
Okay,
my research said 20,000, which, just to put it in perspective, be between $6 and $7 million Canadian today.
Yeah. So whether it was 20 or 10, in the end, he only got 6, but so he was in charge of about 4,000 troops. And I think he was trying to disperse these troops. Personally, I find it very far-fetched how the plan could have actually succeeded, but it's not improbable. And he was communicating with John Andre, who was the British officer, a very popular British officer who knew Peggy Shippen when the British were in Philadelphia. before they got chased out or whatever. And and Peggy was handling some of that secret correspondence. So some historians ever since have sort of accused her of being like the femme fatale, right? As if Benedict Arnold didn't have enough reasons, right? Yeah. So the plan then is hatched, right, Mark?
And the plan fails.
Yeah.
And the plan fails because Major John Andre was captured along the way, and with the notes from Benedict Arnold in his possession.
Yeah. So as a British spy master, he wasn't maybe the brightest tool in the toolbox.
Well, I'll let you decide that as a historian. You can
it's not what happened to him because he was hanged as a spy. Yeah.
So Benedict Arnold, he is alerted that Andre has been captured. And as soon as he heard, he goes, I'm out of here. They're coming after me now. Yeah. And who does he leave behind?
Well, this is it. In the Hollywood movie version, usually the good guy who's on the run, maybe we can't describe Benedict Arnold as a good guy, but the main character.
The action hero.
Yeah, the action hero. Yeah. He takes his family with him, but what does he do? He leaves Peggy and the children behind. Of course, she's hosting George Washington.
So awkward. Now, mind you, I think that probably was the right choice by his family, is to not try to take him for his escape, because he could have easily been killed. If I leave them behind there, they'll want me, but not my family. And that worked out, actually. Washington goes, yeah, Peggy, you had nothing to do with this. We're not going to harm you.
I'm not sure it's Hamilton's accounts, but all these accounts of how men were just, she's so attractive. We can't possibly blame her in any way. The poor young woman.
Attractive people don't commit crimes.
No, exactly. Yeah.
What? But yeah, so Benedict Arnold he's the traitor.
Yep.
And now this is an important thing. He wasn't the only one to leave the American cause.
Yeah. Or to be involved in double dealing. That he's probably the worst case, because he not only violated the Articles of War of the Continental Army, but then he turned around and fought against his former colleagues, inflicting casualties on at least two different campaigns, right?
And which is important that we talk about that. But before that, it's just the American response to the betrayal is they really were motivated to make an example of him, because other people were leaving too. And they go, we have to vilify this guy like no one else has ever been vilified, as the worst scum traitor that ever existed on this planet. They made him into the American Judas.
Well, yes, and actually Ben Franklin used that term, I think, in writing about him right later. So, and again, like they already had this embarrassment of the Tories or the Loyalists who weren't necessarily on their side. So in a sense, it became part of the propaganda battle, right? But the fact also that Arnold, it was found that Arnold had sought some kind of compensation. It made him look like he was a mercenary. I think Washington gave orders: we want this guy, we want him, we're going to execute him, right? But Arnold went into the South, had some success, captured Richmond, but I don't think he hung around too long. So but it was his first major engagement as a British general, right?
And tell me about New London.
Arnold's expedition against New London, Connecticut, late in the war, is almost a war crime. But what happened was the British force went in and they attacked New London. Arnold gave orders not to burn civilian property and that type of thing. But whatever reason, either fires got out of control or the troops exceeded their orders, and much of the town was burnt down. And then there was an attack on a nearby fort. It's a he said sort of thing. In the heat of battle, people were the Americans later accused the British of killing men who were trying to surrender, who had stopped fighting. Right. This time, Arnold was not the battlefield commander on the ground, and so, but because he was the commander, that's Benedict Arnold. Well, what would you expect? He's going to burn a town and he's going to bayonet helpless prisoners, and that became part of that propaganda battle that piled on to a negative image. You see, this what do you expect from this guy? He's a traitor. He changed sides for money. He's unfair.
It fits into the narrative.
Yeah.
So that happened. There wasn't any major military campaigns that he fought on the British side.
No, Arnold got out of Dodge before the official war ended. He left. I should notice too that many British officers did not respect Arnold. Right? He had two things going against him. First of all, he was a colonial, and that's never good, according to the British officers. And secondly, there was this reputation that he had changed sides for money, whereas their buddy Andre, who a lot of them admired because he was aristocratic and educated and urbane, young and handsome, he was caught and hanged, and Arnold got away. Right.
Yep.
So there was that bitterness, and Andre was a hero almost immediately. I mean, King George, paid for a monument in Westminster Abbey. That's pretty. That's as high as you can go.
And not Arnold. And that's the thing. So he went over to London, and he expected to be, hey, I'm George Monk. Treat me like this hero. And he was looked down upon. He wasn't given any opportunities. So it was like right back to being a 10-year-old Benedict Arnold, where we started going, my reputation, my fortune, and everything. I'm right back to absolutely nothing. Then he looks out into the horizon at the Atlantic Ocean and goes, I've heard of a place called St. John, New Brunswick. I think I can make my fortune there. And that is the podcast. Yes, you guessed it. We're leaving you on a cliffhanger. We're doing a two-parter. So join us next time for Benedict Arnold Comes to St. John. I'd like to take a moment to give a shout out to Jane Craig, who left us a really nice review on our Facebook page. Thanks, Jane, and you have inspired us to add a segment to the show called The Mailbag. We welcome everyone to send your suggestions, comments, or just reach out to us at mailbag@nothinghappedhere.ca. With your permission, we might even read your email on a future episode. So thanks, everyone, and hope to have you all back for the exciting conclusion of Benedict Arnold.
Thank you for listening to St. John, Nothing Happened Here. To learn more, join us at www.nothinghappedhere.ca or connect with us on Facebook. Other means of communication include, but are not limited to, telegrams, smoke signals, and carrier pigeons. However you want to reach us, we want to hear from you.